Looks like we haven't had anybody join for just a little bit, so let's go ahead and get started here. Welcome to the hospital stakeholder engagement meeting for Friday, December 11th. This is an extra meeting to talk about two specific topics here, the inpatient base rate reform and the EAPG version update. So thank you for attending the extra meeting, and we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kevin Martin. I'm the Division Director for the Fee-for-Service Rates Division at the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing. I have a couple of people with me today, and I'll let them introduce themselves when they get to their section. And to make sure that we can get through these projects, we are hoping that we can get some participation and some feedback. We've already received some written feedback and verbal feedback in prior meetings, but just want to make sure that we continue those conversations so that we can have the best implementation possible. We are going to be recording the webinar and putting it up onto our website so that people can get to it later. This also means that we'd like people to, if they're participating by phone, to be somewhere that doesn't have too much background noise, and just speak clearly and introduce yourself when you're asking questions. If you do need to get onto the call, please press *6. And also with Adobe Connect, you're going to have to call into the meeting before you can use any kind of audio. Here's our agenda today, and like I said already, we're talking about two really specific things, and we do have just a few other brief updates. So let's go ahead and get into it. I guess first off, these are our Futures Hospital Stakeholder Engagement meetings for next year. Please note the January, July, and September meetings are the second Friday instead of the first Friday of the odd month. And also it's in the afternoon instead of in the morning. This is to avoid conflicts with some holidays and also with the Medical Services Board, where we present our rules. That happens in the mornings on the second Friday of every month. And I'll go ahead and pass it off to Diana for this update.
Thanks, Kevin. Can you guys hear me?
We can,
yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good, thanks. My name's Diana Lamb. I'm the Inpatient Hospital Rates Analyst, and we just wanted to give a quick update on the SPA we have out to CMS. We have not yet gotten approval. The latest since I've been here, which has been about 5 or 6 years now, the latest we've gotten approval from CMS was on the day before Christmas. So we might be hitting that time frame as well today, but as it is, and as happens every year, is that our 1920 rates will remain in effect until that approval is received. And then once we get the approval, any claims with the last date of service of 7/1/2020 to current date will be reprocessed to apply the fiscal year 2021 rates. And again, it's out of our hands. We don't know when we'll get that approval, but we are expecting it will be before the end of the year. So I wanted to talk about the draft inpatient base rate methodology, which we've all spent a lot of Oh, I'm sorry. The rural, there was a question to post the rural health stakeholder meetings for 2021. We can absolutely do that. They usually occur on the Thursday ahead of the date of the Friday all hospital engagement meeting. So I don't have a list of that ready, but they actually are the day before on the Thursday from, I believe it's 1 to 3 p.m. so we can get something out to people for the hospital stakeholder stuff. Thank you for the rurals. I apologize for that. So back to the draft inpatient base rate methodology, which I've been working on. The estimated implementation date has been extended to 7/1/2022. There's just a lot going on with COVID. Everybody knows that. And you know, it's no small thing changing the inpatient base rate methodology. So to continue time and effort to put into that, the extension has been made. So we don't have to try and get this done before July 1st in the coming year. However, what we do have to talk about is what should we do for the fiscal year 21-22 rates that will have to be implemented on 7/20/21. We want to walk you through that and get your feelings on it, but we are suggesting keeping the fiscal year 2021 inpatient base rates as they are and applying the state budget action set by the legislature directly to those rates. And just for people who are familiar with the EAPG base rates, what's been happening the past couple of years is that they've just been applying the state budget action. But we can go, our next slides go into more detail for this. So how it would work. The state budget action, which is a part of our base rate setting every year, runs anywhere between a negative 1% decrease to a 2% increase. That's within the time I've been at the department. So for example, if we take a ABC Hospital's base rate of $6,724.90, and the state legislature approves a 1% increase, the new fiscal year 21-22 rate would be taking $6,724.90 multiplied by 1.01 to get the new rate. If there was a 1% decrease, we would take that same amount and just multiply it by 0.99 to get $6,657.66. So that's, I mean, it's pretty simple calculation. That's what would occur. Please don't take anything from my saying a 1%, you know, up or down increase or decrease. We haven't the slightest idea what will be approved by the state legislature. This is just for demonstration purposes. So we kind of wanted to go through sort of the reasoning for why we would like to put this forth. It's going to allow us, if we do just apply state budget action to fiscal year 21-22 rates, it's going to allow more time to work through the iterations of the new base rate methodology. If we used current methodology to rebase rates and then work on a new base payment methodology, it would be shut down for like 4 to 6 months because I would have to spend all my time doing rebasing rates as we normally do every year. We've also received some notice from rural hospitals, and they are very concerned about building hospital rates for the coming year with COVID-19 claim activity. And it's not a small concern because if we did build rates for fiscal year 21-22, there's going to be 3 to 4 months of COVID-19 claim activity, and more specifically, nearly a month's worth of claims from March 23 to April 14th, which is when elective surgeries and procedures were suspended. So that would have an impact on how the base rates would be calculated. So just something to think about. The other thing is that we're not really sure how Medicare base rates minus DSH or disproportionate share would be affected with COVID claim activity in the mix. It's the Medicare base rate minus DSH is our starting point for the Medicaid base rate. So by only making these legislatively required adjustments, there would be less ambiguity in next year's rates, because I can't really tell you what problems we might come across. I can only tell you that we would have to be on the lookout for problems, and then we'd have to deal with them. So these are just some of the reasons we like the idea of applying a state budget action to fiscal year 21-22 rates. If people have questions, we'd love you to throw them out there. We've had Kelly put together for us a survey so that we could actually get everybody's temperature. If you could answer that survey and tell us if you want to ask questions before you answer, we're happy to do that. But just, yeah, let us know what you're thinking.
And just so everybody knows, this is still something that we're talking about internally as well. So this isn't a for sure thing one way or the other. We're just trying to float some ideas out there, because no matter what happens, we're going to have to deal with the impact of COVID within the base rate methodology. This is just one potential solution.
So Ryan has a question
Ryan
about
is asking what the timeline.
Go ahead, Kevin.
For what the timeline is to make the decision. So let's see, we pretty much need to make it here, I think in the next month, maybe a little bit less. I mean, we can always get started down the regular base rate calculation methodology and then go back to the state budget action, but like we were talking about there in the pros, cons, or reasoning, it really does take like 4 to 6 months to build the rates under the old or the current calculation. So we have to get started here pretty soon if we have not decided not to do those.
Yeah, and part of the rebasing of the rate is that in January is when we tell all the hospitals to start pulling together their cost reports to send to Myers and Stauffer. Those are due. It's their most recently audited cost reports. They send it to Myers and Stauffer, and then we use that information to calculate the add-ons for the year. They're due by March. I'm going to say March 30. I might be wrong, but it's certainly March is when they're due. But that would be something that, hospitals have work to do to get that information to come in. So it's not just my work, but also hospitals. And to be honest, the sooner this decision is made, the better, because it's not a small amount of work, and it's a good portion of the year I spend doing this. So the sooner we know, the better.
We don't have a whole lot of responses here. Looks like it's going a little bit skewed towards using our regular methodology. If I could just ask the people in that group if you feel comfortable to give us some of your concerns about or reasoning behind why you want to do it that way. Or I'm hoping maybe we can just give you some more information about the idea, or make this a little bit more of a discussion, so it's not just us spouting off something, and then I just don't want people to just stay with whatever we got just because it's familiar. We got Christina typing rather. And just so people know, you can also hop on the phone if you like. So the state budget act, so Christina, just so you know, the state budget action will most likely be lower than the already low calculation. We have to take that into account no matter what, the state budget action. It just means that if we rebase or use our current methodology, that means that some hospitals could go up a little bit more, but then that has to be balanced out by other hospitals going down. So to us, it's going to be completely neutral. This just makes it so it's more evenly spread across all hospitals.
Diana, this is Ryan Westrom. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. Hi. So I just wanted to bring up, you know, once hospitals have a chance to kind of digest, kind of choosing between one of these, should they email you or reach out with you directly? I think you might be able to get a little more feedback from hospitals after they've had a chance maybe to discuss internally. But
You know
should they
what?
just email Diana or Kevin, or how would you like that to
You know,
move forward?
that is an excellent idea. You know what I'm thinking? I wonder if I could send out an email to all the hospitals with a survey attached to it. I haven't done it myself yet, but I know we have the ability to do it. Let me work on getting an email out next week with that survey. And then hopefully we'll get some good participation, because people may feel like they can't really speak for their organization even though they're here. So that way we'll have it go to everyone, and hopefully they'll share it with you know, whoever the powers that be to make that decision. But thanks, Ryan. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and just like what I was saying, we're still floating this idea internally. I don't want you guys to think that this poll right here is, you know, binding in any way. We're just trying to get an idea, and then, yeah, definitely answer some questions so you can make an informed decision. So, and I saw that intermittently that Jeremy and Ryan were typing. Give that just one more second here to see if it comes through. like Kevin's typing as well. Jeremy
Sorry,
must be typing
everybody.
a novel, either that or maybe Adobe's just being a little bit slow.
Hey, Kevin and Diana, this is Jeremy. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Hi.
hi. Yeah.
Hey. Sorry. Yeah, I was typing something before Ryan responded, and he sort of changed, or basically he was alluding to kind of what I was going to mention. But so, I mean, I think it's a good idea to provide an opportunity to give feedback. But I was just going to say my initial reaction is that, I mean, I don't think we would be opposed to just having our 2020, 2021 rates just updated by the state budget action percentage. I mean, like you alluded to, you're going to incorporate those rate changes anyway. It's just, are you going to do it at the high level and create winners and losers, or are you going to do it at the individual hospital level? So, I mean, I'm guessing for most hospitals, it's probably not going to make a whole lot of difference. And so, like I said, my initial reaction is that that I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yeah, and that's what we see on a year-to-year basis anyway. So take last year, for example. We had a 1% decrease. We worked that into the methodology. That means that most hospitals end up getting about a 1% decrease. But then you're going to have like one hospital, just because of something that happened with their Medicare base rate, that ended up going, let's say they went up like 5% or something like that. That means that everybody else actually had to go down a little bit more than 1%. Either that, or there's like another hospital that went down by 5% as well. And then those, depending on volume of utilization, those pretty much balance out. And then again, you have like one person or one hospital going up by 5%, another one going down by 5%, and then everybody else is going down by like 1%. So. Oh.
Hi, Lila. Can you hear
Can you guys hear me
this? Oh, okay, good. She can hear.
Okay. And I don't know, Diana, Kelly, did you guys hear me talking about how the last year
Yes.
example works?
Yes.
Okay.
I do think there's a bit of a delay.
Okay. Just one more minute here for Lila to finish typing. And so just to expound a little bit more on what I was just talking about, the real big advantage here is that because we don't know until we incorporate all the COVID data exactly how that's going to impact things, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Medicare rates because of COVID. There's just a lot of unknowns within our current process. So by doing it this way, it just removes so much of that ambiguity and really helps, honestly, you guys to just have a little bit more certainty. I know that there's still some uncertainty in exactly what the legislature is going to do. Unfortunately, we can't really do anything about that. But we can remove other points of uncertainty.
So one thing, I'll just, it appears as though Lila can hear me, but can't really hear Kevin talking. So Kelly's saying that the audio to PC and phone are about 1 second delayed currently. I can't understand why she can't hear Kevin though. I don't know, Kelly, do you have a suggestion? You know, is one way better than the other for this? Like, you know, dialing in with the telephone versus just using your microphone on your computer?
No, I think that I was just going to suggest to Lila that this might be unique to her, and she just needs to either restart her webinar, or you know, you can certainly join the audio on the phone. But currently, I'm listening to the audio on both streams and hearing both. So, you know, generally speaking, unfortunately, it's like we restart our computers and it resolves a lot of issues. It's similar there. We restart our webinar and it should resolve that for her.
So, folks, hopefully you can hear me. This is Kevin J.D. Wilson with Children's Hospital Colorado. I feel like I probably don't have enough grounding to decide. So you know, not being able to judge, I haven't voted, but I do want to bring this back to our team.
So Kevin, Kevin,
I
I can clear this up for you. You've been getting state budget action for years now. Your rate has been broken, which is part of the reason why I've been trying to do a new base rate methodology. We'll be talking about this later on in the presentation, but we have no other way to update your rate other than just apply the state budget action as it is, and it's been happening for years.
I see. Got it. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah. So actually for you guys, the two options are the same thing.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, then I guess it's good I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Right. Okay, so you know what? We can always circle back to this, but if I think we've agreed that we're going to send out an email so that more people can participate. Right now, we've got a 50-50 on the survey anyway. So we will send out. I will get some help to send out an email that allows us to do a survey, and we'll hope to hear from you guys. You know, what you're thinking, and then we'll get back to everybody on what the decisions are made by upper management. But we will try and get that email out as early next week as possible. Again, I haven't done that yet, but I'm sure it's somewhat easy to do. I know we have the ability. So if it's okay, can we take down the survey, Kelly? Okay, great. So I wanted to just jump in. We have heard a lot of feedback from stakeholders regarding the new inpatient base rate methodology, which is great. That's exactly what we want to hear back. And some of the things we're hearing are across the board in that people just don't really understand why we're changing the inpatient base rate formula. So I'm going to go through a couple of the struggles we go through and why we want to do this. The other thing is that generally everybody just wants to stay with the Medicare base rate minus DSH as a starting point. So again, once we go through some of the reasons why we want to do this, such as we don't have a base rate methodology to calculate a rate for Children's Hospital and or the critical access hospitals. They just get the peer group rate for whether they're rural or urbans. We would like to have a base rate that we actually create for them. People want the NICU nursery add-ons maintained as is, and they also want additional add-ons for specialty departments. So one thing I do want to bring up on this slide is, what does everybody view as a specialty department? I'm thinking it's rehab and psych departments, but those are DPU departments that aren't recognized. So distinct part units that aren't recognized for separate claims from each hospital. So can somebody just kind of throw out what specialty departments you're talking about specifically?
And it's not here. I'll just let you guys know that in our responses, because we are still working on responses, they do need to get cleared all the way up through upper management, so sometimes that can take a little bit longer. But at the moment, a lot of our responses for additional add-ons to specialty departments is sort of like, well, we can consider that. We just need to know a little bit more about what you consider to be a specialty department. We just don't quite understand. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page and speaking the same language when we're talking about what a quote-unquote specialty department is. So, and definitely for all these add-ons, we're absolutely willing to discuss them further. I think there's a couple of things, and I don't think that these are on there at the moment, but people were asking about like IME and capital and that kind of stuff, some other things that are part of the Medicare base rate methodology, and we're going to talk about those too. Like those are really easy things for us to, consider and just incorporate. So I just want to, again, make sure that we're all on the same page when we're talking or making sure that we know what we're adding in.
Right. So there's, we're throwing.
Like nobody wants to clarify here.
And that's okay. They can, we'll talk about add-ons later on in this discussion. So if they want to think about it and talk about it later, that's fine too. Okay, we've got Jeannie is typing right now, so I'll just stay here for. Okay, so Jeannie had from SEL Health is saying that she's not sure about the specific add-on request, but typically we talk about specialty departments being as oncology and cardiology and etc. So that's helpful to know that those are some of the other specialty departments that people are likely referring to when they say that. So again, Jeannie at SCL Health, there may be concerns about the backlog of care due to delayed care.
Is that in reference to the specialty departments, or is that going back to the previous discussion? Sorry, I'm not quite sure if I understand how that fits in. The backlog of care.
Oh, okay, so yeah, her mic isn't working either on the phone or the computer. Yeah,
and just so everyone knows, we as a department are working on, you know, we're always working on making sure that these technology things are as good as we can possibly make them. And I realize that this Adobe specifically is not the best for interactive conversations. So we are looking to see if there's anything we can do. Let's see. So Jenny says, but the typical scenario is that we have many patients who are delaying screenings and treatment, and there will be a surge of that type of care post-COVID. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure that's happening now. Yeah. And you know what, listen, we're going to be having another meeting on January 8th, so we'll be going into this in more detail. And again, we've extended the base rate implementation to July 2022. So we have time to talk more about these things. We were just hoping to, and I appreciate your giving us some ideas of what other, you know, what hospitals considered other specialty departments.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to just move on to the next, and we can always talk more. So again, people weren't really sure why we wanted to make some changes to the Medicare base rate, less DSH, which is our starting point. So I'm just going to tell you guys from the outset, I know I have complained on multiple occasions here about not being able to get the DRG disclosures from the hospital intermediaries. Considering they are meant to be intermediaries, you'd think it'd be easier for me to get them, but surprisingly, it's not always that easy. So for fiscal year 1920 example, my initial request was on 10/25/2019. I finally received data on 1/10/2020, and it took at least 4 follow-up emails. A typical thing that's happened to me several years in a row is that I tell them I am part of the state Medicaid department trying to get to set inpatient hospital base rates. And in this case, I'm picking on Novitas because they handle about 98% of all the hospitals in Colorado. So I get the lion's share of data from them. And when I sent in my request, it's a big request and they don't like fulfilling it. I get that. That's why I give them as much time as possible. But they often come back and say, why don't you, we already sent it to your colleague, which is a hospital, and told me to get it from them. And that, it turns out that that hospital never requested all the Colorado hospitals' DRG disclosures. They just requested their own. But I don't want to call out the hospital that did this, but they actually sent a note back saying, we didn't request this. And again, I don't want this to seem petty. I just want it is a constant problem. And it's not, one email and I have to wait a month or two. That's fine. It's the 5 and 6 and 7 emails that I have explained what I'm trying to do and finally get it. So every year it's resolved. I actually do get them. It's just the amount of difficulty getting them doesn't seem right, considering they're supposed to be your intermediary. So going forward, we may still need to get DRG disclosures, especially if we include things like, and not start from the federal base rate, but we introduce capital with IME and operating capital IME with geographic area, so GAF adjustments, all those things. I'm probably going to still need it. I may need to ask some hospitals to help lean on Novitas to get me stuff. So I'm not even going to go into this other example that I've got here. I'm just hoping that I can get some backup from hospitals to get me the data I need in a quick and easy fashion to make all of our lives easy. Another thing that's happened is that even after getting the DRG disclosures, they're incomplete. And the example I can give you is we have had hospitals who have participated in the CMS Rural Community Hospital demonstration, and in it is where they get paid. They get paid on a cost basis, and therefore the low volume payment portion is no longer calculated. So even though I'll get a DRG disclosure, it won't give me the information I need to calculate a low volume payment to include into their Medicare base rate, less DSH, which is the starting point. So we had to go through this whole situation where we contacted the guy who runs the CMS Rural Community Hospital demonstration, told him the data is not available. He was completely unaware. He was wondering how everybody else across the nation is doing it because the data is not there for anybody. So it took a while. We had to set up a system, and luckily, I mean, the guy was great. He set it up, got in touch with Novitas saying, you have to put together how you're going to get this information to Colorado. So we're very appreciative in that regard. What I am going to say is that the year it was discovered, there were 702 claims that were adjusted that they had to wait 11 months to get payment for that because it happened during our new interchange system when it was installed. So it delayed the adjustment of those claims. And it wasn't a small amount of money. So again, this is one of those reasons that makes us concerned about using the Medicare base rate less DSH as our starting point, is because we have proof of where it's not correct. And even the knowledge of the information not being correct is not known by the agency who's putting out and creating all these programs to help, like the rural hospital community. This was meant to help them, and in fact, it was hurting them. And the other thing, as we mentioned with Kevin, is from Children's, is that Medicare does not build rates for non-prospective payment system hospitals. They are paid on a cost basis. So we've got critical access hospitals who just get a peer group rate. The number of hospitals that create that peer group rate have been diminishing over the years as they all turn into critical access hospitals, as well as Children's Hospitals hasn't had a working base rate methodology for years. So these are the reasons why we're trying to look for a new base rate methodology that will cover all hospitals. And even so, with the suggestions everybody wants to make to adding to the federal base rate, that will only work for PPS hospitals, and we'll go through that later. But it's something to think about, because we really do need to have a working base rate methodology for hospitals, and that would be all of them.
And just to put a little bit finer point on 2 slides back, like with the low volume payment, this is just one example of something that can happen within the Medicare payment or base rate setting methodology. They make changes all the time, and they don't actually have any requirement to tell us, and there's not really a good line of sight that we have. So there have been other minor changes and we can fix it, but this could happen to any hospital at any point in time, that Medicare makes a change and it ends up affecting their rate that then flows down into our current methodology, and we're just going to have no idea that it happened. So some of the things that people or the hospitals have requested here is that we add in a wage index adjustment, that we add in the standard federal rate, which is related to capital, the geographical adjustment factor for that, and then operating and capital for indirect medical education. I think all those are absolutely something that we can look into further. I don't see any real problem with adding those things in. So we don't have that as far as a like modeled out at the moment, but we'll include those in the next model. And then to give you sort of an idea of what we're looking at, I know this is a lot of numbers and a lot of information here, but I think part of what we're hearing is that there's just a lot of angst around going to a new methodology. And I just want to be clear that we're not actually deviating from our current methodology that far. So our current methodology would be including all this stuff. And what we're really talking about removing at this point is the stuff that's in light gray lettering. So there's like the dish, which is already taken out. There's a hospital-specific amount. And then there's the dish capital payment, again, which is already taken out.
And then the low volume.
The low volume payment, which we're talking about just doing something that's more specific to us instead of to Medicare. So it's really, and then instead of starting from the Medicare final base rate and then trying to take pieces out, we're talking about like using the components that they use at the beginning and building it up so that we actually have something for everyone. So I hope that helps a little bit to make people feel a little bit better about what we're suggesting here. Is this is not a huge, vast deviation from what we're currently doing. You could almost even look at it as sort of we're just tweaking our current methodology to make it work better. And I guess I do want to point out here something that has gone back and forth a couple of times, and we can continue to talk about it. But there were also a couple of questions about if HAC and the hospital-acquired conditions and the readmissions adjustments were duplicative of things that were happening in the HTP and HQIP models, which those models are meant to sort of encompass the supplemental payments. They're not really meant to encompass what's going on with the base payments. But I also wanted to point out right here that those two things are already part of our current methodology. So when we show those as being part of the new methodology, that's actually no change. That's just we're keeping something that is already there.
And that includes the VBP, the value-based purchasing adjustment, which is part of the Medicare base rate calculation.
Okay.
So, no. Oh, is somebody?
Oh, there it is. Okay.
So the and here's where again, we've got the non-prospective payment system hospitals that are paid on a cost basis through Medicare. We haven't been using the Medicare base rate minus DSH to create a rate for all those hospitals, and still won't be able to. That's kind of why we were trying to go to the federal operating portion, We can add the federal capital portion. That was to get us to a starting point where all hospitals, we could use the same data. I can't, so looking back, if we go beyond, we could do a federal base rate that includes the operating and capital portion. At first, we were just talking about the operating portion. So we can add both of those in. If we add in these wage index, the IME amounts, use these value-based purchasing, all of those, we can no longer use that same base rate methodology for non-PPS hospitals. So what do we use as a starting point for non-PPS hospitals? This is to kind of explain as to why we went with the federal operating portion, which we probably should have done the federal base rate that included the capital portion from the beginning. But regardless, this is kind of why we were going with this, is that the other data is unavailable for non-PPS hospitals. And again, I don't think we're going to solve this here. We're just trying to explain to you kind of the boundaries we have working within Medicare base rate as a starting point. So I think, again, we alluded to it earlier about the add-on discussion that stakeholders are interested in NICU and nursery add-ons. From our point of view, these add-ons really are holdovers from when the department used MSDRGs, which was built from a Medicare population, which is older and had no severity of illness component to the weights. It still seems to us that these add-ons should have been removed back in 1/1/2014 when APR DRGs were instituted. But that's kind of our feeling right now. Doesn't mean it's off the table for discussion, but I don't know, Kevin, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think what we would really want to what we would want to see here is maybe have a look at some of those claims, because it sort of seems like that should be accounted for within the weights of the DRGs. And if the hospitals are not seeing that way, then I'd sort of like to understand how you guys do see it. Because in a NICU, theoretically, you're doing something that is higher resource intensity, so it should get assigned to a DRG SOI combination that has a higher weight, which then drives up the payment. So it seems like that makes more sense than adding something into the base rate, which is applied to all claims regardless of whether they happen in the NICU or not. And I'm just using NICU as an example. You could substitute that with nursery or any other specialty department that you want. Because all of those do something specialized, but that should be associated with the specific claim and the DRG that gets assigned, not to the overall hospital and every claim that occurs within that hospital. I hope that sort of makes sense, or at least describes a little bit more where we're coming from. I guess that's just one of the things where, we're not saying, no, I just need more information about like how this actually applies. Because if we're going to incorporate something, we want it to actually make sense. We don't want to say, I don't know, give a NICU add-on to a claim for a 60-year-old heart patient or something like that. That just doesn't make any sense. So I guess at least at the moment, that's the way that we're going. And if any of the hospitals have more information that they want to put forth about NICU, nursery, specialty departments, those types of things, we just need more information. We need to have a lengthier conversation about it. So I'll go ahead and go to the next one here. And I know that I was not at the last meeting, and I heard that there was some disappointment that we didn't go into more of the add-ons. So I at least wanted to list out the add-ons that we have right now and open up that conversation. So, you know, I think that we're taking a little bit of a step back, so maybe this is less of a concern at the moment. That's why we're focusing a little bit more on the why we want to do this. But at the moment, the add-ons that we have incorporated into the last model that we presented are critical access hospital, low discharge hospital, independent hospital, pediatrics. We have an add-on for payer mix, and then 3 financial metrics that were net patient revenue per adjusted discharge, hospital-only operating expense per adjusted discharge, net income per adjusted discharge, and then we would just keep the current GME add-on exactly the same way it is. So I know that we've presented those before, and we're happy to discuss them further. I just wanted to at least have a slide devoted to this, since I heard that, you know, there was disappointment around not having more in-depth conversation in the last meeting. Give you guys just a second here. Just linger in an uncomfortable silence for a bit. I guess, unless anyone corrects me, what I'm going to assume here is that these are just less of a concern at the moment because we have extended the implementation date. So if anybody does have any comment or question, feel free to reach out to us. But I guess for now, we'll go ahead and move forward. And I guess just one more slide, again, opening it up. If there are any other comments or questions about the inpatient base rate methodology reform work that we're doing right now, we wanted to give you more of a chance to talk about it broadly or to ask any other questions. So please let us know. Like I said, we are going to be responding to the written comments and questions that we received. Those are just working their way through our internal clearance. Okay. I'm assuming that all the hospitals have said what they want to say here or in their written comments that they've delivered to the department for now. Okay. Well, now I'm going to pass it off to Andrew.
Hi, everyone. Hope my sound is okay. Okay, getting reports that it's good audio, so hopefully that continues. I'm going to be presenting on the EAPG version update and just provide a little bit of background as to why we're doing this, what the implications are, and then a little bit of how we plan to model the changes in payments that are going to occur, and also how we're going to do that over this next calendar year. Okay, and all right, so just to give a little bit of background on the project, we implemented the EAPG payment methodology back in October of 2016. when we did this, we modeled everything and implemented using the version 3.10. These are all maintained and developed by 3M, the EAPG methodology, and the different versions. And they actually release each version, each update on January 1 of each year. These are distinct from the quarterly module updates that we regularly provide updates on, which generally focus on just applying the code set updates for CPT, HCPCS, or ICD-10 to the existing version of that EAPG methodology. However, 3M does not maintain the EAPG versions indefinitely for these updates. In other words, eventually 3M is going to stop maintaining version 3.10. More specifically, after January 1st, 2022, they will no longer be maintaining these. So we would have the option to continue using version 3.10 after this point, but since 3M wouldn't be maintaining it with those code set updates, it would get really complicated, and we really just don't want to go that route. Really, it's pretty much required for us to actually make an update to a newer version by that point, just so we can maintain, billing standards with how we should be at that point. But again, the EAPG versions are released January 1 of each year, so we do have some time, and we will be getting a new version of EAPGs to play around with in the coming weeks, hopefully, for the January 1, 2021 release. So our current plan is to upgrade to this version, 3.16, which, like I said, will be available to us in the coming weeks. So the version updates themselves, really what they do is try to account for changes in outpatient hospital care delivery. And 3M uses national data that they acquire and statistics in order to develop these changes. And generally what these changes end up looking like is just modification of the EAPGs themselves, or adding new EAPGs or removing outdated ones. And modification of EAPGs generally means CPT, HCPCS, ICD-10 codes just being associated with different EAPGs across versions. Because of these modifications, there are new cost weight statistics that 3M releases in order to accommodate the shifts of procedure codes from one EAPG to another, or the costs associated with those procedure codes from year to year. So 3M thankfully provides all of this data to us in the form of what they call their national weights. So a couple of just other small parts of the version updates that that will impact Colorado is that there will be modifications to the packaging and consolidation lists. For those familiar with the EAPG payment methodology, there is a significant amount of bundling that occurs on the EAPG claims, where procedures are assigned EAPGs for ancillary services, which are effectively packaged into some of the more resource-dominant procedures on the outpatient hospital claim. Also, there's a consolidation list which combines payment for similar procedures that are billed on the claim, generally where there's an established hierarchy of certain procedures that maybe are more resource dominant that lower procedures get packaged into. So multiple significant procedures could be on a claim, but they don't all necessarily make a distinct payment. There may be a consolidation effect where only one procedure is paid on that claim. One of the most crucial updates that this version update will bring will be to the inpatient-only list. 3M right now develops its own inpatient-only procedure list, which essentially denies certain procedures that appear on the outpatient hospital claim. Or let me rephrase that. It doesn't deny them, it just generates no payment for them. Unfortunately, the department has no means of modifying 3M's list as it exists right now. The only way in which we can actually make any updates to this is by updating to the new versions of EAPGs. Generally, 3M looks at those CMS guidance and also its own statistics as well in order to develop those lists. So by making these updates, we will be essentially modernizing the inpatient-only list. So I know that there's been a handful of headaches that we've heard about since our implementation of EAPGs in regards to these lists. Like I said, this update will hopefully resolve a majority of them. And then as we move forward and see how this update goes, more regular updates will help keep our payment methodology in alignment with sort of what's happening on a national level for these inpatient-only items. Okay, so sort of the key points that we want to drive home here is that yes, we are required to implement a new version of EAPGs prior to January 1, 2022, which is when version 3.10 is no longer going to be maintained or supported by 3M. One of the key aspects of this is that we are constrained to budget neutrality. We are going to go over that in a little bit over how we're modeling that and what that means for hospitals. Let's go ahead and continue. Really just the statewide amount that we're spending for outpatient hospital claims has to remain the same throughout the transition between versions. That may reorganize a little bit of how hospitals are paid within the system on a hospital by hospital basis. And so I want to go over kind of an overview of our what our modeling is going to look like. So part of understanding a little bit of what's going to drive some of the changes in payment is understanding how we implemented EAPG. When we first implemented back in 2016 and all the work that we did prior to that, we developed our own EAPG cost weights rather than just directly using 3M's. We used 3M's to help fill in some gaps in some of the data that we used, but really it was kind of a hybrid model using both 3M's data and Colorado's data. Colorado, we developed our weights based off of a combination of claims data over the, I believe it was 3 years prior to when we started developing this, and also recent cost reporting data that we obtained through our contractor. They obtained that through the HCRIS database. So in combination with that and 3M's data, we developed the weights that are currently in use. Obviously, this was something that took us a significant amount of time if anyone was around for the EAPG implementation. So we believe that if we are going to do more periodic or more regular updates, it would be best to just simply use the 3M cost weights in order to accomplish this. So our goal as we make this transition is just to use the national weights from 3M and not make any modifications to the hospital-specific base rates. When we do implement, there may be some changes, as Diana mentioned before, just with regards to state budget actions, which may impact those rates, which we'll definitely have to consider as we move forward in the transition. So in order to essentially make this transition, we need to take 3M's existing weights that they have, and we're going to need to scale it in order to maintain, or scale them to maintain that budget neutrality. So I've actually gone through and worked with version 3.15 just to get an idea, or at least present again what the model is going to look like for how we're scaling those weights. In order to accomplish this, I got all of the calendar year 2019 outpatient hospital claims data and reran it through the EAPG grouper that was released January 1, 2020, so the most recent available version of it, just to sort of illustrate this process. Eventually, we're going to need to go through a similar process once we get access to the 316 weights and grouper version. So to elaborate a little bit on that calendar 2019 data, we took all of those fee-for-service claims, reran them through the grouper, and we essentially calculated sort of the maximum allowable claim payment for each of those outpatient hospital claims. So to elaborate a little bit on what that means, we did not take the actual payments associated with those claims, but instead took the EAPG weights that have been adjusted after consolidation, discounting, packaging, all that stuff, and multiplied that by the provider hospital base rate, which was effective July 1, 2020, or will be effective once we obtain CMS approval. And again, this is just to get an idea of what we're going to need to do for scaling on the weights. So this is not anything that's set in stone. Again, the reason why it's the maximum allowable payment in this instance is because there could be other factors which affect these claims payments. For example, if the billed amounts are lower than the actual claim payment, there's some times where the claim will pay on the billed amount instead of the actual maximum allowable EAPG amount. Generally, those don't happen as often as claims being calculated with that maximum allowable payment, but just due to budgetary concerns, we have to allow for that maximum amount. So across the calendar year 2019 data, we had approximately $603 million allocated for that maximum allowable payment. And that's across 1.6 million outpatient hospital claims. So we are defining that $600 million figure as kind of our budget neutrality constraint in this model. So we effectively took that same set of claims and reprocess them through version 315 of the EAPG grouper. And we're using those July 1, 2020 rates essentially to create what the maximum allowable payment is for the new version. This comes to about $200 million. So this is indicative that the existing national weights are, the ones that are provided by 3M, are significantly lower than the Colorado-specific weights that are currently in use. So we're going to need to modify that in order to meet that budget neutrality constraint. So again, going back into the scaling factor, just have to do a little bit of math here, but it's not too difficult. We're essentially taking the, trying to figure out what that scaling factor should be by dividing the 3.10 version maximum allowable payment by the 315 version maximum allowable payment. Both of those figures I went over earlier. And the scaling factor ends up at around 3. It's at the bottom here, so 2.955 or 56627. So I put this table together just to give an idea of what that means for the translation of national weights into Colorado weights under this 315 version. And really it's fairly simple. We're just taking the 315 weights, multiplying it by that scaling factor to come up with the Colorado weights. Obviously this is just a small sample of the EAPGs, but the same formula would apply for all of the EAPGs in this version. So again, as I alluded to earlier, there is that budget neutrality constraint that we're applying on an aggregate level. In other words, all of the payments that we're making to our in-state hospitals. So obviously, as we shift around these dollars from one version to the other, hospitals are going to be impacted by this. I've presented sort of an example here, which is just randomly pulled from some of this exercise. On the second column there, I have the maximum allowable 310 EAPG payment. So that should be roughly what was paid for each hospital during the calendar year 2019 time period. The maximum 315 EAPG payment is what was calculated using those national weights provided by 3M. Again, we did have to multiply that scaling factor, or multiply the weights by that scaling factor in order to come up with a new payment that meets that budget neutrality criteria. There is going to be a difference in those maximum allowable payment from version to version there, which is something that we're going to need to carefully assess. Obviously, we don't want to see any significant shifts in payment for a hospital from one version to the next. So we're going to have to do some digging to figure out what are some of the sources of those more significant pieces of variation from each version. So again, that was sort of the overview of how we did it for version 3.15, and 3.16 has yet to be released. So when we do get release of this version, we intend to go through the same model and hope to present a little more granular data on this. It's just something that we're unable to do right now. 3M has released the updates that they plan to make for our version 3.15 to 3.16, but without the software, we're just unable to figure out what that means for 1.6 million outpatient hospital claims. So we're going to be working through that, hopefully once we get the release at the end of this month, and then intend to have something by the next stakeholder engagement meeting, which we hope to show what that version transition means for hospitals. And that likely will be a more collaborative conversation if we run into issues where we have to figure out what we can do to sort of mitigate any potential gains and losses for certain hospitals. Like I said, our current objective is to maintain the existing hospital-specific base rates as we go through this into version 3.16. Hopefully we don't have to make any adjustments, but because unfortunately 3.16 has not been released, we just don't have any good foresight into what that's going to mean for each hospital. So before I close this out, did anybody have any questions about the transition to version 3.16? Okay, I'm not seeing a ton. I will elaborate that we do have until January 1, 2022 in order to make this change. Our current aim is to align it with the start of the new state fiscal year, so July 1, 2021. However, we will require some changes in our rule and state plan authority in order to actually accomplish this. So that means that we would need to get the ball rolling and making those changes probably within February, March at the absolute latest. So definitely want to be cognizant of, how this impacts hospitals, individual hospitals, and try and develop, like I said, any proactive solutions that we can if there are any, like I said, wide shifts that would cause significant gains or losses to hospitals through this transition. So, like I said, we'll know more hopefully by the next stakeholder engagement meeting, and we can continue to have those conversations and maybe even provide some hospital by hospital impacts at that point. But obviously, due to safe harbor constraints, might not be able to share everything. But again, we should have more concrete numbers by that time. So if nobody has any questions, I guess I can just go ahead and move on. But otherwise, if there are any concerns about the actual change, please let me know. My email should be at the end of the presentation. So I can address that through there and hopefully bring any concerns to the January meeting. Okay. And just one last additional piece as it relates to broader outpatient hospital payment reform. We did bring this up in the November meeting, but we are currently contracting with Myers and Stauffer for essentially obtaining costs for drugs through surveys. And this is open for hospitals to participate in. It's actually encouraged that hospitals participate, as this was essentially going to drive what we do for outpatient hospital drug payment reform in the long term. So the more information that we can acquire through these surveys, the more accurately we can essentially hopefully pay these drugs, which I know have been a pain point for several hospitals during the EAPG, as we've implemented EAPGs and continue to pay that way. So if we don't have this information, then we really don't have a strong means of moving forward. So if you haven't already participated or viewed the webinar link and contacted Myers and Stauffer about it, it is highly encouraged that you do so. This information would be greatly valuable to us as we continue reforming these payments. Okay, and I think that brings all of my...
I was
go
just
ahead,
going to
Kevin.
second that last slide there about the drug survey. You know, we've heard a lot of complaints about drugs and EAPGs. This is our path forward. Please participate in this survey, because if we don't have participation in the survey, really that's just going to show me that it's not actually that big of a deal. So if you are still concerned about drugs within EAPG, we really need you to participate in this drug cost survey.
I would like to add on just one additional point to this as well. Obviously, as we've seen with our current implementation of EAPGs, that yes, drug payments are out of alignment with their costs. We completely understand that. We are planning that transition to version 3.16. Understand that as well, but it is still likely to have the same problems that we currently have. The transition might change payments in certain ways, but you know, if the problem is the fact that we are creating bundled payments for drugs, that's not going to go away with a transition to a new version. So it is crucial that we get this information if we're planning on finding a way of paying these outside of EAPG.
And then Jeannie at SCL, or Jeannie, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, said or asked, what's the deadline for the survey? It is currently the end of the month. It's been open since the beginning of November. If people do need more time, please let us know, reach out to us, just ask and we'll see what we can do. But at the moment, the deadline is December 31st. And Lila, the last time that I got an update from Myers and Stauffer, who is the ones collecting these surveys, there were 4 hospitals, or 4 responses. So that may encompass several hospitals, because I'm sure the systems are just submitting one survey result. Yeah, and I do understand that the pharmacy teams have been scrambling, developing vaccine plans. That's why we're trying to leave extra information out there. I do know that this is not ideal timing, but it's taken me several years to get to the point that I've gotten money to do this. So if I just like dropped it right now, then we'd be another couple of years out to try and come back to it again. And since this is like a pain point that we keep hearing about, then I would, sorry, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. We want to try and continue to move forward, and that's why we are also willing to extend the deadline if that is something that people need. And let's see, have they reached out to Emily Zedvorny at Colorado Pharmacist Society? I don't believe so, and I'm a little bit familiar with the Pharmacist Society. I believe that's a little bit more geared towards like prescription pharmacies, isn't it? Or is that more geared towards the pharmacists themselves? Okay. Yeah, that's another good place for us to research. Not sure if who's going to be able to respond as far as like the invoices go, but we can definitely ask. Let's see. So Liza says, FYI for Kim B's monthly call with hospital CEOs, which typically focuses on COVID, we are going to ask her to flag the drug survey for CEOs. This will help get the word out more, and we'll do a bigger push with our communications too. Thank you very much. So the price of drugs as far as I've seen, has not actually been affected by COVID, at least not on a grand scale. You know, there are some individual one-off examples there where things do change, but like the overall, like, say a chemo drug, as far as my data show, has not, like, oh yeah, the volume definitely has been impacted. So I could see that maybe if there are some places that have done nothing, then they would maybe not have an invoice for that. But really, we don't need volume for this survey. We just need the actual cost of the drug. So, and we'll be, as far as our modeling goes, we'll be taking that into account. At the moment, we're really just trying to get an idea of the actual cost of the drugs. From Lila, one more question. Do we know approximately how long this survey takes to complete? Unfortunately, I don't have an idea of what it looks like on the administrative side of the hospitals. Really, we're just asking for, let me see, can we open this webinar link while we're presenting here? Doesn't look like it, or I'm not going to be able to figure it out really quickly. But really, we're just talking about like a NDC, I think it's like purchase date and price, and there's a couple of other like little items. So it's really not extensive. It's only as extensive as your drug, like the number of drugs that you have in the hospital. So I think we're also totally willing to accept variations of it. So whatever is sort of easiest to pull out of the system is fine. We're just trying to get, again, however you can report that cost to Myers and Soffer. And then we pay them to figure out how to like consolidate and match everything up. Yeah, Stephanie, that is, I agree that if it was not actually purchased during that month, then that is going to create an issue. I guess we're hoping that there are enough examples out there, and that's also why it's important for many hospitals to respond to this survey, so that, you know, if we're missing one observation from one hospital, that it's not going to make it so we're trying to make an average of 1 or 2 observations. So the more hospitals we have, the more observations we're going to have when we're trying to do these average cost analyses. Okay. Stephanie and Lila are talking back and forth a little bit there, just saying that the pharmacy department was able to get a report from the vendor. So, like I said, we were really open to to what makes it easier for you guys. We don't want to make this burdensome. We really want to just get as much information as we possibly can so that we can do some good analysis here. And to, again, just reiterate, the reason that this is so important is because we have a couple of one-off examples, but without having a good, robust sample from the entire hospital environment of what these costs are, then we're not going to actually be able to do analysis. And without the analysis, we can't like tell our management or the legislature or anything how much it would cost to make a change. So if I don't go to my boss or to the legislature with some kind of figure. I just say, hey, this is what they want. They're going to just immediately turn me away and say, okay, go figure out how much it costs first. So that's the point we're at right now. Okay, great. Well, thank you. And just a question and comment slide. So if there's any more questions or comments on anything we've talked about today, or any concerns that you have that you would like us to address at the upcoming meeting, or anything at all, please let us know. Just hang out here for a minute and see if anybody starts typing or if anyone speaks up on the phone. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing anybody typing and not hearing anybody on the phone. So here's our contact information if something strikes you after the meeting. And have a nice weekend. Thank you, everybody.